I was born in 1984 in a big family in Somalia. We lived a normal life until the early 90s when the war broke out. Somalia became and still is one of the most dangerous countries in the world. My father was killed at the start of the war. Food became a luxury, and everywhere you looked, you'd see starving people and dead bodies. My mother decided to take us somewhere safe so that we didn't end up being killed. I was 7 years old when I arrived in a huge refugee camp in Kenya. We were well looked after by the aid workers, but Kenyans didn't like us there. Occasionally, we were allowed to leave the camp and they would call us names. "Don't come to our country," they would shout at us. I spent the next 12 years in the camp, enclosed by wires and cut off from the rest of the world. I served a prison sentence, you could say, for fleeing the war. I paid an agent to help me escape the camp in Kenya. I wanted to live as a free person. Arriving in the UK was a traumatic and frightening experience. Abandoned by the agent, I desperately tried to explain as clearly as I could to the immigration officers at Heathrow that I could no longer live in a refugee camp. They interviewed me for hours and tested me for TB and some other illnesses. I was then sent to live in an hostel. It was such a cold winter in Britain. I was in shock. I was frightened of everyone, especially the police. I thought that as soon as they saw me, they would arrest me and send me back to Somalia. This is the kind of fear some people in refugee camps experience, because you know that nobody wants you and your problems. I was alone. I couldn't share what I was going through with anybody. I met my solicitors for the first time just before my asylum interview. The Home Office asked me lots of questions about Somalia, about war and factions, about who had power where. I tried to tell them I was a child when I left Somalia. I didn't have a clue about the things they were asking me. My application for asylum was turned down. The Home Office said that I didn't convince them I was from Somalia. They believe I was a Somali from Kenya. I spent the next 6 years appealing for them to reconsider their decision. I was moved from city to city, and each time I had to find a new place to live and a new lawyer. Just as I started the college course, I received a letter saying I had to go and live somewhere else. It was like a long, exhausting nightmare. When I arrived to Bristol, I started going to Refugee Action for advice. I then started volunteering with them, going into the community to speak about refugees. We speak to people who had never met a refugee and explain the reasons why we had to leave our countries. For years I was not allowed to work. I could not complete any of the courses I had started. Volunteering finally gave me a purpose. It gave me a chance to improve my skills and an opportunity to be around other people. The hardest period was when my support was cut off due to an administrative mistake on behalf of the Home Office. For 2 years I was forced to live, first without any support and then on a small number of vouchers for food. I was in the middle of a rich country, but I was hungry with no possessions and not allowed to work. I found my escape in public libraries. I read thousands of books, which is probably why my English is fluent now. Over the period of 6 years, I went through 8 court hearings. Almost each time I had a different solicitor because I had to move around so much. All that time I was worried that I would be sent back to Kenya or Somalia. In Kenya, I would never be accepted, let alone offered a job. In Somalia, I'd be forced to take up the arms and fight. Following the 8 court hearings, I was finally recognized as a refugee. I felt as if somebody opened the window in a dark room and I finally saw the sun. I immediately started looking for work. I didn't want to lose another second of my life. Refugee Action recently introduced me to Michael Palin, somebody I really admire. He supported a campaign supporting better relations between refugees and Brits, and I taught him a few words in Somali. He picked it up really quickly, and he said I spoke English like a statesman. It was a dream come true.